Today I'm just going to talk a bit about the car and why I chose the car I chose, what I want to do with the car, my big plan, my vision, and what is the actual first milestone I want to achieve. So for me, picking the right car to build was more a case of the emotive response that I got from the car rather than how well it is supported by communities or forums or even the industry. The car that I did choose was a 1967 Ford Galaxie 500. I had seen this car in a magazine once about 18 months ago and liked the body lines, liked the look of it, the aggressive stance, the grille looked a bit mean and tough. Did a little bit of research on the car and it had a nice big block engine. They came with a big block engine. Had a bench seats. I love the bench seat. This is cool. I like the bench seat. Yeah, they were the things that caught my eye. But I felt I wasn't ready to actually make that kind of a commitment, which if you buy a car to build, it is a commitment. And I'm kind of figuring out just how much of a commitment it is. It's kind of scary. Not as much as marrying someone, but close. It's pretty close. Yeah. Also, I actually went to the Summer Nats in 2018 and saw a 67 Galaxie there. Nicely done. It had a high rise with a blower on it. It had blacked out windows. The interior was nice. It looked really good. And that's kind of when I bit the bullet and was sold. I got to see what the car could look like after it had been built. But that's part of this channel, right? The amount of time, effort, and money that went into building that car was probably more than my mind was actually comprehending or realizing at the time. Also, it was probably done by someone who knows what they're doing. That's not me. I'm going to learn while I do this. So, which comes to the other part of why I think this car probably wasn't the best car to start learning to build on, and why a Mustang or something like that would have been a better option. And that's because it's a more obscure muscle car, especially here in Australia. There aren't as many providers of parts or industry support here in Australia. It might be different in the US, and it definitely is. Like, you can search for in Summit or Jegs or some of the other online car part stores and type in Ford Galaxie 500 and a whole bunch of parts will pop up. But here in Australia, it's a little bit tougher. Also, there's not as many people here in Australia that have Galaxies. I found out there's a fair few, and Australia did actually import the Galaxie for a number of years in the 60s and early 70s. Full right-hand conversion with the Lincoln dash. So externally the car looked very similar, or at least in its four-door version, but the interior was completely different. The dash looked different, apart from the fact that the steering wheel was not on this side, it was over here. It had a completely different dash, which for the American version of the car, I love the dash. It's amazing. I don't know why they kept it, apart from the cost of shifting it over. Purchasing the car, I purchased the car sight unseen, so I didn't go and have a look at it. I relied on the seller's description of the car and its condition, and also the history. I didn't ask as much of the history of the car that I should have, and that isn't a concern. It's not a real worry. It's more relating to how much work and how much learning I have to do, and the starting point at which I would have. The car was owned by a bloke in Seattle, which I would love to find and share this with him. It was owned in Seattle. He had started to build the car, and at some point got sick or something happened and he had to sell. And I can see that this guy has put some time and effort into the car. There's new control arms at the front. There was new springs. The engine has had something done to it. There's a new Edelbrock Performer intake manifold, an Edelbrock carby. It's like 650 CFM carby. What else? I think the rockers may have been changed, which means heads may have been replaced or machined or cleaned up. I don't know, and that's not a concern, but it's also something I have to figure out and get the car started and listen to and see if there's any knocks or pings or something that's wrong. But other little hints that had happened were things like the radiator. I didn't know this until recently, but the radiator was actually wrong for this car. So the reason why it wasn't fitting in its mounts or the mounting points weren't lining up was a complete mystery to me. I wasn't sure what was going on. The engine has been out and been put back in and wired up somewhat, but I've noticed that ground cables haven't been put in. There were a couple of wires that weren't actually hooked on that I had to hook on. The carby has been placed, but there was no accelerator cable, there was no kickdown cable or kickdown linkages for that matter, and the electric choke hadn't been hooked up. So there's little hints like that. All of that's okay. Like you need to learn and you take on a car warts and all when you come to building cars. But it kind of brings out a specific point that I'd like to make, in that if it's the first car you're going to build, try hard to find something that is in a state of repair that you're comfortable with. It has all the pieces there in place, because if you're not familiar around cars, around engines and around fuel systems, electrical systems, heating and cooling systems, then learning is going to be a little bit steeper. I'm not super comfortable around cars. I have done my own work on various cars. I had an 85 Ford Bronco that I rebuilt the engine on, or at least the top half. I pulled the heads off, got them all cleaned up and machined and put it all back together. I had a 2002 Holden Monaro, which is the GTO, the Pontiac GTO in the US. And I started doing all the work for that myself, mostly replacing brakes, replaced the clutch and thrust bearing in that. So I am kind of comfortable around cars, but each car is new and different. So if you're going to buy a car to build, I would strongly suggest you pick something that has all the pieces there and is driving. Almost to the point, like so close that you just need to do a bit of buffing and change the brake pads or something, and you can get it registered. This is not that car. There's a lot more than I realized I needed to do to actually get this on the road. All right, so the buying process. When I bought this car, like I said, I first saw it in the magazine. 3 months later, it's still in that magazine, and it's also still on the seller's website. So I bought it from a bloke down in Victoria. He was really good. He was honest about what the car had and didn't have, to the best of his knowledge, which is probably a key point there. He has a lot of cars and specializes in importing American cars, but I don't know what his ability around vehicles is. He told me that there was a bit of rust. He was true about that. Every bit of rust that he pointed out was there. I haven't found any more rust in places that is really a deal breaker or going to cost a lot to get fixed, so good. He was honest about the history of the car and the parts that were there and weren't there. Good with that too. But like I've said before, as I've started to pore over the car, look at the finer details of the car, I've seen other little bits and pieces that kind of make your heart drop a little bit, because like I just found a crack in one of the rear tail lights. That's a little bit of extra research, money, time and investigation that needs to take place to actually get the car up and running. He did say there was some rust in the trunk, which is common for these cars, which I found out. I didn't do any research on that, but I should have. There was some rust in the trunk, and there's a good sized hole. Like, there's a big hole in the trunk. New fuel tank, cool. The engine has had something done to it, and I'm kind of keen to hear it and find out what's going on. There's no fuel filters from the new tank to the carby or to the mechanical fuel pump, so I need to put that in. So, buying process. I bought the car sight unseen, in a warts and all fashion. Like, there's not much I can do about it. Once I've paid my money and I get the car and I kind of realize bits and pieces are missing, or I don't have everything that I wanted, then it's up to me to fix it and find it, right? If I had my time over, maybe I would have saved a little bit more money and purchased a car that was a bit more complete, that was driving. But I mean, again, the price range there is, I wasn't going to tell the price on the car, actually. I wasn't going to tell everyone what the price was, but I bought this car for 14,000 Australian dollars, delivered to my front door, which is a bit of a bargain. I was told that the car was this far away from being registered and put back together and registered, and that's not too far off the truth, but there's time to do it, right? The things I would do differently: one, start with a running car, a complete running car. That would be the most important thing. That would be the first thing I would do. The second thing I would do is do some research on that car. How many were made in that year? How many were made with the options that you were given, or your car has? And the reason why I would do that is it gives you a bit of a better idea on the availability of parts. For instance, the reason why Mustangs are so popular in Australia and the US, I guess, apart from that prestige like Bullet and that heritage in like car culture or culture in general, every year actually had a fairly good production number. Galaxies are up there. They did get popular, especially with their NASCAR and drag histories that they do have, but still not as popular as Mustangs. So that's number two. Do your research on your history and find out how many of that car were made and how well it is supported in industry and aftermarket. This is something else I would do. The final thing I would do is, if you can, before you purchase the car, is see if you can get your hands on a shop manual or a repair manual that can give you an idea of the complexity of the systems that are involved. So if you're looking at pulling the hubs apart off your front to do a disc brake conversion, you can find out just how much effort is involved and how it actually pulls apart and how it can go back together. It'll help you figure out sizes of parts and just how it all goes together, which is huge. It's I was really lucky with this car, actually. I got a box of a mystery box, and in that mystery box was the shop manual for these cars, for the 1967 Galaxie and I want to say Mercury. That's right. Because apparently they have similar parts. So I was really lucky. Within that box of parts, there were the original drum brake spindles on the front. There were a whole bunch of bolts. There was actually a half-used ARP bolt kit, which was pretty cool. That made a bit more sense. I could see what was going on there, what happened to the engine, based on what pieces we used. So there were head studs gone, there were rocker cover studs gone, there were intake manifold studs and exhaust manifold, I think. They were all gone. There were a few other bolts there, but kind of gives me a hint of what's actually happened to the engine. What it didn't have is the original radiator. I had a cross-flow radiator from something else that just wasn't going to fit nicely into this car. Yeah, it's a bit of a hit and miss with this one. I'm still happy. I really am. Like, I'm really excited about doing this car. Which kind of gets me onto my next point. My name's Andrew. I'm a 39-year-old bloke who lives in Queensland, Australia. I'm a software engineer by trade. I actually am trying to get out of the software engineering industry and get into mechanical engineering. So I've gone back to uni and I'm having a go at that, which is a bit of fun. I've never done this before. I've actually never built a car like this, like a ground up build. I intend to do a frame off rebuild on this, but first things first, right? I wanted to catalog the build mostly for my own interests, mostly for my own an opportunity just to see where I've come from to where I am at that point, as a motivational thing, like as a point where I can step back and say, well, the car started and running and it's registered, but 6 months, 12 months ago it wasn't, and I can watch the process myself. And I thought that might be interesting to other people, so I thought I'd put it all online. One of the things that kind of encouraged that idea is looking at the other channels out there that do car stuff. Hoonigan, for one. I love their build biology. I love watching those guys come in and talk about the cars that other guys have worked on, and the time and effort and the passion and the love that they have for that car, or even sometimes it's the love of the technology, or just, I don't know, just an enjoyment of that. And that's kind of where I fit, I think. I'm impressed with the amount of effort and ingenuity and artistry that goes into building stuff. Cars definitely, but my other interest is medical devices. That's pretty cool too. Like, you see some of the stuff that they do there and the intricacies of how they do things, and that's amazing. You look at an engine and the orchestration of everything that's moving in unison and has to be precise and on time, and to do something so big and so precise is just, floats my boat. It really does. It gets me here. But then you look at other guys like Roadkill, the Roadkill guys. They just go and find a car in a junkyard, pull it out, give it a bit of a polish, spray it out with a gurney or high pressure hose, throw some fuel in it, kick it over, and off she goes, and I'll drive down the street and have an adventure, which looks great, looks a lot of fun. I'd love to do that too, but not really. Breaking down on the side of the road is be a bit of a pain in the ass. But they make it look easy, right? They make it seem a little bit easier than it is. And don't get me wrong, these guys have years of experience in doing that. So there's a tipping point in which they've, in their career and their lives, where they've gone from hard, bit easier, and now makes a bit more sense for them, especially if they still work around similar cars and similar era of cars. Other channels that kind of motivate me or get me excited and interested is the Eastwood videos, and just their instructional videos that they do for various bits and pieces around car building and restoration. Is really cool and interesting. That gives me motivation and it keeps me interested. But I found the Z sled build that they did a while back so these guys that are doing the builds make it look easy, make it look a little bit of instructional, but in my head I'm thinking, oh, I can do that. That doesn't look too hard. But even though I haven't really wrenched on this car just yet, the reality is fairly difficult. It's obviously not that easy, but I kind of wanted to find out for myself. Part of getting to your destination is the journey, and I wanted to learn about building cars. I have an interest in engineering in general, and I thought I could start to marry the two a little bit and see how much effort is involved in actually restoring a nice old car. The final reason for actually starting this channel is to use it as a vehicle to kickstart a bit of a social enterprise. In my life, I have helped other people put cars together, build cars, participated in various steps of building cars, getting cars back on the road, painting cars, etc., etc. And the two things that have always made me happy is imparting knowledge, helping friends, and helping others achieve goals. Like it's always been something that leaves me feeling happy that someone else has achieved or moved forward or progressed in their life or career or whatever. So I'm hoping I'd be able to use this channel as an opportunity to kind of evolve into that, eventually get a shop and start inviting people to come in and help work on the vehicles, and build a bit of a community around that. And being a social enterprise, the intention would be to buy an old car, get a group of people to build it, sell the car at an auction or at a charity event, and that money going to a charity, which I would like your participation in that, in either suggesting cars to build, suggesting charities to donate to, or other ways that working on cars can help benefit community, society in general. I'm also interested in electric vehicles and electric conversions. That is something that I'm also pretty cool. That is also something that I think is pretty cool and would like to investigate. So that's it for this episode. Just wanted to introduce me and the car and the reason why I'm doing this. Next episode, we'll have a look around the car and find all the bits and pieces that need to be fixed, and what the first milestone is. So if you want to keep up to date with the videos and the build, hit subscribe, and if you want, hit the little bell and you'll get a notification when the next video comes up. I'll try and keep them as consistent as possible, but life and other things will get in the road, which is part of your build process. So cheers, thanks very much.